And with me now is Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid, Chairman of the Parliament of the World's Religions. Thank you for joining us. Now, my first question to you would be, the concept of moderation in religion is not a new thing. But what can we learn from moderation in this day and age?
Moderation is a way of life. People are more successful who are moderates, and people who work as a lifestyle of moderation are beneficial to the society and to themselves. But sometimes people who have new ideas, they like to have their ideas known to the world. Just like a car which is standing, and if you want to drive, you have to put it in first gear. A lot of energy it takes.
Right.
Once it starts working, it goes in moderation in the second or the third gear. It takes energy. So there are some revolutionaries and there are some extremists who are for their ideas. But the challenge for moderates is that how do we communicate with those who are very serious about their ideas and think we're just wasting time and they want to go ahead. So communication with those who are not quite moderate, I think, is extremely important. That's why America, after bombing Taliban so long, is talking to Taliban.
Right.
And Muslims and Christians need to talk. Christian and Jews and Muslims need to talk. Similarly, different groups in the society need to be in communication with each other. So once a certain group adopts extremist ideas or extremist measures, they're able to communicate with them for the cause of moderation. Because moderation is to their benefit, except at a given time they may not realize that this is very important for them.
But like you said, sometimes it begins with military intervention in the case, of the US and Afghanistan's Taliban. Do you think, and this is also seen as a form of extremism, military intervention?
Oh, it does. I mean, and one of the president of United States was General Eisenhower. He was a military commander and achieved a lot of things. In his presidency, he says that war achieves nothing.
Right.
It kills people. It does not achieve anything. So how people can persuade governments to stay away from war? For that, cooperation among governments, understanding between the governments, and also understanding among people is important. While America was engaged in war, there were Americans who were persuading their government not to invade Iraq. Now even President Bush is saying that maybe we made a mistake. And President Obama promised that we'll end war. He ended actually delivering on his promise to end the war as he promised. But in the meantime, a lot of people died. So it's a challenge for our time, that how we deal with extremes and stay on the course on the middle path.
Do you think extremism is really what causes most of the world's conflicts? A lot of people talk about these fault lines, and the fundamentals of differences that have created these perceived clashes, a perceived clash of civilizations as it is today. Do you think there's any truth in this?
I think a professor has done a marvelous job. His name is Professor Robert Pape. He happened to be my class fellow,
right.
But I came to know him very late that he was my class fellow. He was funded by the US Defense Department, and he has studied all the cases of suicide bombing in the world. And he concluded that suicide bombing has nothing to do with any religion. It was used first in the modern times by Tamils who happened to be Hindus, although they were not acting on their faith. And it was against the Sri Lankans who happened to be Buddhists. So it was not a religious conflict. It was essentially a perception of occupation. So he said suicide bombing is directly connected with the occupation. So if you want to diffuse terrorism, you need to end occupation. This is a thesis which was funded by the US Defense Department. So there are reasons for extremism, and we should discuss that. And after knowing what causes extremism, we need to engage extremists in conversation, because those people are human beings. once they touch hand with each other, once they eat bread with each other, or maybe rice in certain cases, it starts opening up a conversation because each one of them have families and children, and they're looking for the future of their children. So there are a lot of points on which extremists could be engaged by those people who are moderates. But that engagement need to be taken as a serious challenge for moderates. And many times it has happened. One of the greatest example of a moderate being able to deal with the extremist is Nelson Mandela. He was in Robben Island for 18 years in 8x8 cell. He started communicating with his captors in the prison, which led to a dialogue, which led to his release, and which led to whole revolution in South Africa. So this is the power of human communication. So at that time he was called a terrorist.
Right.
Now world knows him as a greatest freedom fighter on the path of nonviolence.
And this is a question I've actually asked quite a few of the people that I've spoken to. One man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist, or they can develop that way. Where do we draw the line?
Actually, we don't need to draw the line. We need to speak across those lines. And when people connect with each other, they will realize the humanity of the other. I think this is the path of great people in the world, especially the prophets, who all worked on decreasing the conflict by communicating with all people.
Now, from a theological point of view, is the secularist worldview compatible with that of the religious worldview that is employed in, governments in the Middle East, for example?
There is no one form of secularism, and there is no one form of religion. Both secularist and, in the case of Muslim Islamist, need to talk to each other. In the Middle East, if Arab Spring has come into being, it is still spring. It will grow into summer, and there will be some falls and whatnot, but humanity will move forward. And it is important for a secularist who has been in power through military or bureaucratic regime to be in communication with Islamists who have never been in power. Since you have not been in power, you don't know how to rule. So they can learn from the secularists. And secularists who are out of power are wondering what's going to happen to us. Right. Well, talk to the new people, they will find common ground because they care for their country. They want their country to grow. They want liberties and freedom. They may disagree in the details of different points, but that's where communication needs to take place. And I hope and pray that Arab Spring continue to evolve and it results in dialogue which is good for the whole society.
But some, people who want their voices heard often lock themselves up, keep to themselves simply because of the threat of being exterminated by, in a government, for example, like the United States, who in that time was weeding out the Taliban. How then, in that situation, do we do our best in trying to communicate with them?
I think Taliban at that time and America, if they have talked, they had channels of conversation because United States was giving aid to Taliban until their demise. So they had channels of communication. So if both parties have given importance to it, communication would have taken place. Instead of now, after 10 years, America is talking to Taliban. What about talking before you kill? So there may not be a need to kill. And the result is that it has resulted a lot of devastation for America, not in terms of human life, but overall cost of war is devastating for America as it has been devastating for the United States, for Afghan people.
And what about, the other thing that, of course, has suffered in the last 10 years is the face of Islam, because it has been, linked to terrorism, unfortunately, when a sticking point of the global movement of moderates is that this is not a campaign against religion. Religions don't cause wars. It is the difference between moderates and extremists. Why do you think religion has then risen to the surface in these conflicts and, received such backlash in the last 10 years?
I think both things are happening at the same time. On one side, ignorant people who do not know better, who do not have connection with the other human beings, have seen them through stereotypical images. And that causes conflict. In Australia, one experiment was done. They selected 100 people, Australians, who have extremely negative opinion of Islam and Muslim, called them Islamophobic. And then they brought in 30 Muslims. They had no books, they had no documentaries, they were not imams or preachers. They just left them in that room for an afternoon.
Yeah.
At the end of that, they surveyed those 100 Australians once again. What do you think of Islam and Muslim? This time, half of them have positive opinion of Islam and Muslim. While no preaching has taken place, no Quran has been read, no, there was nothing else said. So human beings are basically good people. Human beings are all innocent. They acquire images externally, in this case through media, and when they have opportunity to connect, they understand. And same thing happened in America. When America came to know someone wants to burn Quran and he's a Christian, all the Christians were speaking, "Are you crazy?"
Yeah.
And whole country, editorial and talk shows, and all were speaking against the burning of the Quran. Same was the case in Abu Ghraib. Same was the case when some Marine urinated on dead Taliban. Whole America stood up that this is not us. So if media plays a positive role in telling the story, it can contribute to good behavior among the extremists and the moderates. But when media plays a wrong role, for example, somebody putting a bomb in the turban of supposedly cartoon of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, people say, what in the world is that? And the moderate response to that was in the Middle East that people started boycotting Danish products. It was a non-violent response which went on for 2 years. Denmark lost millions of dollars because of that. Why they did that boycott? Because that paper and the government was unwilling to talk to the Muslim community in Denmark. So they started this boycott. Now the extremist response was in Somalia, in some places somebody killed a Christian nun. What Christian nun in their country has to do with that cartoon? So people thinking that somehow your neighbor who's a Muslim is responsible for bombing of some place is taking your neighbor for a ride for nothing. So people need to, so neighbors are neighbor. Muslims and non-Muslims are neighbor to each other. But if media plays a negative role in the area of cartoon, whole thing meant a game became extremist. Now Muslim think Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was such a peaceful person. He was preaching peace. After every prayer, he will pray for peace. Muslims still do throughout the world. And he established the peace sanctuary. Only when people came attacking the peace sanctuary, God encouraged him to speak up, encourage Muslims to stand up and defend. All that defensive wars literally were just for 6 days. All war of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, literally for 6 days. And from both sides, less than 300 people died. For that, you're depicting Prophet as a violent person. It really hurts. But when you're hurt, that's where the call of the Prophet is to be moderate in your response and behave in a way that Prophet will be proud of you, as a lot of Danish Muslims did. But there were some, unfortunately, not Muslims who became extremists. So one act of depicting a cartoon was a psychological violence against a whole lot of people who loved Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. There were Christians who spoke up in support of Muslims and saying this is wrong, you shouldn't do that. They were good people.
Now, would you then say that the media, in its own way, has not practiced some form of moderation? Has it, because we have been accused of sensationalizing things and therefore forming opinions, and helping others form those opinions as well, those who watch the news, watch the, internet feeds?
If media stands true to its own ideals, giving both sides of a story, and providing equal coverage and going deeper, then they will be doing justice. Media should be independent and telling the story properly. But in the world of 24-hour news cycle, if they're repeating certain bad news repeatedly, it becomes a problem. But it is not just the media. I think opinion makers need to be responsible. For example, at one time, United States would use the term Islamic extremism, Islamic fundamentalism, Islamic fascism. And we as an American Muslim felt our government should not attach the beautiful name of our faith with something horrible, which we all hate and dislike. So we entered into dialogue with our government. And it was in the Bush era when Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, and I congratulated her personally at her invitation in the State Department, she dropped the uses of that term. And President Obama and the State Department maintained this policy that we will call extremist, not Islamic extremist. We'll call terrorist, but not Islamic terrorists. So that's an improvement in behavior. I wish media had followed the same line, which they have so far not done that.
Yeah,
by and large.
We love our terms and, you know, all the new terms that we can create each and every day. But do you think you're somebody who's involved, very much involved in the media yourself? And I'm sure as being traveled around the world, you not only know the nature of the American media, but also media in the East. Do you think it has reached a point where it is independent, or are we still skewed?
I think media, whether it's America or any other part of the world, has all sort of things in between. There is a level of independence, there is a level of dependence. There is a human dependence that the journalists have certain hours because journalists have his and her family and finish up the job and go in looking for an easy way of doing. Yeah. But then there are people who take longer time. They are the one who become Pulitzer Prize winners and a lot of that. I think it is important to continuously have independent studies about how media is doing and encourage the good media and responsible media and discourage sensationalization. Sometimes media extremism, like in America, it is symbolized through Rupert Murdoch's Fox Television and its enterprise, and they sensationalize. And there are people who criticize them on the regular basis that this is the harmful way of moving forward. I think as the new media is coming up, the possibilities are tremendous for individual to think of an idea and go for it. And eventually you will find somebody with very cheap production have hundreds of millions of viewers on YouTube. So this is the possibilities of future. So I encourage people who have their opinion and ideas, and especially the moderates among them, to tell their story. Because telling their story nowadays does not require millions of dollars. It's a cute way of understanding and presenting your point in a powerful way that you can relate with people. You can overcome the absence of millions of dollars with a great idea.
And to reach millions of people as well. Now, is that how you hope a media will eventually work hand in hand with the global movement of moderates to spread, to educate people about this concept and how it can work in, I suppose, in ensuring the search for proverbial world peace?
I think the challenge for the global movement of moderates is that moderation is not like, dog biting a man. So it is, so how you create that appeal. So telling your story has to be the top priority of the global movement if it wants to go beyond a political assertion or it wants to go beyond the intellectual discourse. It needs to tell its story. What has been achieved through that. I mean, there are plenty of heroes who are moderates who are not recognized because they are not human beings who have bitten a dog.
Yeah. What about human beings? That's a very interesting point that you make, actually. This would be my last question, is that a lot of people that we've spoken to have said that the global movement of moderates is not a political standpoint. It is not a governmental standpoint, but it is up to the individual. So right now, we're hearing these notions of GMM from people at the top. How do we filter it down to the bottom so that at the grassroots, people grab the concept and tell their stories?
Actually, grassroots, most of them live moderation every day in their life. Each family faces those issues. Husband and wife dealing with children faces the issue. It will be the job, I think, of all of the people. Individuals realizing, but if it's a public policy, the government then need to invest in telling the story of the moderates in a powerful, beautiful way, not through just talking heads, but through documentaries, through films and animations, so people can recognize, hey, moderation is great. Moderation is hot. Moderation is something which need to go for. Moderation is where the money is. Right. Moderation is where you succeed. Moderation will make you win. I mean, that's the way I think it will be helpful. So I think government has to play a role, intellectuals have to play a role, intellectuals need to articulate, government need to fund, and media need to tell the story why moderation wins.
Thank you very much for your thoughts, man. It was fantastic speaking to you.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.